So, if you didn't watch the first 3 parts, this is a great place to start. I bought an old car with a couple of friends and decided to drive to China. Last time we had just gotten the infamously hard to get Turkmen visa during our last days in Iran. A quick plug, you can subscribe if you want to help the channel. Anyway, after we got the visa, we left Iran and drove towards Turkmenistan. The route would take us past Damavand, Iran's tallest mountain, with snow on the top. As we drove through the mountains, the sun set and nighttime came, so we decided to rest for the night in Amul. We drove around the city, but Amul must be more popular than we knew because we couldn't find any hotel with rooms available. Luckily, we met Hamid, Mashid and Mustafa. They invited us to their place and we had a great dinner party with them. Hamid kindly invited us to sleep in his home. After driving with one arm out the window all day, I noticed it was painfully shifting to a pink color. The next day, Hamid and Mashid wanted to show us the Caspian Sea, the world's largest lake. They didn't want to swim, so we just dipped our feet in the water. Even though it didn't look too far on the map, it still took a couple of days driving to the Turkmen border. We set up our tents right next to the border with a view of this little border town. When morning came, there was a lot of paperwork and small fees from the Turkmen border guards. Some fees were without a doubt legit and should of course be paid, while others seemed suspiciously made up. After some traveling, my experience is with most unjust bribe demands, patience is the best strategy, so I decided to wait it out. Well, since we were the only car crossing, the police took out a dominoes-like game and began playing. Tai was waiting on the Turkmen side of the border for me and the car. After waiting for what seemed like an eternity, I hate to admit it, but I lost this battle and paid them. Well, we were finally in Turkmenistan. And it felt awesome. We drove about 30 kilometers to the capital Ashgabat and were only stopped by the police twice on the way. I have tried not to pay too much attention to politics during this series since it's really not what it's about. But if you do Google Turkmenistan, you'll immediately get stories about the dictator who changed the name of the month to his own and his mother's name, about the giant gold statue of him rotating, so it's always facing the sun, about banning smoking for the entire country when he personally wanted to quit, about forcing everyone to read and be tested in his book about his moral guidance. The book also has a giant gold statue, by the way. Well, he died and his successor Berdimuhamedov undid some of these policies, but there's still no denying it still remains one of the world's most closed dictatorships. On the Press Freedom Index it used to be the absolute last country, but it actually moved up a spot last year. And you do sense these things while being in the capital, Ashgabat. It's one of the strangest places I have ever driven. Turkmenistan is rich in natural gas, and billions of dollars went to building the showpiece capital with the world's highest concentration of white marble buildings. Driving around completely empty streets with 3 or 4 lanes in each direction feels surreal. We rode all over the place looking at all the monuments, such as the largest indoor Ferris wheel. All look very clean and beautiful, but also somewhat artificial. It was a bit sketchy without people on the road, apart from some policemen. Driving our car near the monuments in Ashgabat was not really convenient since we were stopped all the time by the police, but it was a unique experience. Compared to getting a tourist visa as most visitors would, where you have to hire a guide for a pre-planned program, we could go around independently, apart from of course dealing with a lot of police. They had given us a permissible route in advance we should follow. But you see, Turkmenistan is famous for having a big burning hole. Back in 1971, a natural gas field collapsed and methane gas came up. So Soviet scientists tried to burn it and intentionally set it on fire. Well, 50 years later, it's still burning continuously, so we had to diverge from the route and go and see it. As soon as we came out of Ashgabat, the roads went from the best to the worst, but driving through the desert was really awesome. We didn't see many people, but we did pass some camels. Actually, a lot of them. They were pretty abundant. We also saw a few of these lizards, which we thought were really cool, so we stopped to have a look at them. They sought refuge in the shade of our car, so we had to get them to go away since we of course didn't want to drive over them. Occasionally in the middle of nowhere, we of course also met a couple of corrupt policemen who wanted bribes. We were not really sure where the hole was, but having looked at Google Maps, a few different places were marked. We parked the car on the side of the road next to the first spot. It was a big hole and there was some fire and some gas bubbles emerging. To be honest, on its own it was incredibly cool, but was it the right one? It didn't look as fiery as the pictures online. This guy on a forum had posted some GPS coordinates, which we decided to try. It seemed to be around 5 kilometers away from the road, so we decided to leave the car behind, put our tents on our backs and trek through the desert. When venturing into the desert, it's important to always be prepared. I have learned from Donald Duck that you should always wear something like this on your head. Maybe for the sun or something. I take no responsibility for our strategy, but always split up and don't bring too much water. Also, vodka is available everywhere in Turkmenistan and it's unbelievable cheap, so why not bring a bottle? We headed towards the hole, crossed some train tracks. I have to disclaim the next part. Tai is an idiot. He saw this snake, and even though Tai can appear like a smart guy with his round glasses, he doesn't know much about animals in Turkmenistan, and especially absolutely nothing about snakes in Turkmenistan. Well, he wanted to take a picture of it and put his hand with his phone next to it, so it got scared and immediately jumped and tried to bite his phone. But I guess he got this nice picture. We did later learn that the snake was not venomous, but still I give him 0 out of 10 points for this stunt. We might not have taken the straightest or quickest path, but after a couple of hours we could see the fire lighting up in the horizon. We were thrilled that we had made it there. We took a couple of selfies next to the hole and set up our tents a short distance from the hole, since being in close proximity was very hot. This was without a doubt one of the coolest things I have ever seen. We captured this picture where, if you zoom in, I'm this little guy. The hole is also nicknamed Gate to Hell for obvious reasons. We just sat by the hole all night just talking. The next morning we headed back, crossed the train tracks again, drove back towards Ashgabat, saw some more camels, and met a bit more police. Once in Ashgabat we found a Soviet-style hotel with big empty rooms. Everywhere was nicely decorated with pictures of the president. There were of course no Wi-Fi in any of the hotels, but for entertainment there was an amazing hours-long broadcast about children singing for the president. Top-notch TV. I have been focusing on the more unusual aspects of the country, and I would like to say something about the people instead. Though a bit more reserved, they were friendly and kind. When we would ask for help, people would help us, especially the ones who were not employed by the police force. Regretfully, while driving a lot there, it was a bit harder meeting locals compared to the prior countries, but the ones we met were very nice. So I have nothing bad to say about the Turkmen people. Next, we drove towards the city of Meru, where we were immediately stopped by the police, who, without any measurement, claimed that we had driven a lot faster than we had. When we had made an offense, I have no problem paying the fine, but when it was clearly made up accusations to extort us out of money, the best strategy was to be calm and polite, but firmly and stubbornly refuse to pay, and maybe act a bit naive. We wasted a lot of time with arguing with the police, but most of the time it worked out and we didn't have to pay anything. The next option was, we each had a small stack of international driver's licenses. They were all legal and officially obtained back in Denmark and just cost about $4. Technically it's not a driver's license, just an add-on, but the Turkmen police did accept it. So when they would ask for a driver's license and refuse to give it back before we would go and get the money, we just left it behind and immediately drove away. Finding hotels was not always easy, so we bought some cucumbers, nuts and water and just put up our tents in the desert. I had downloaded a couple of episodes of The Simpsons on my laptop, which we watched in our tents at night. The next day we continued to Turkmenabat, a quiet day where we strangely only had a single encounter with the police. This time they claimed our car was too dirty. We drove over a floating bridge to Farab. Finding a vacant hotel room was difficult again, so we stocked up on some more cucumbers and took a night more in our tents. We were a bit tired and hungry after all the driving and desert lifestyle, and we ended up having an argument. I don't really remember what it was about, but Tai told me not to drive the car into the sand since we would get stuck. I have to admit, I was an idiot and acted like a 3-year-old. On one hand I knew well he was right, but on the other hand I thought I don't want to listen to him. Anyway, we reconciled and became friends again when we had to spend the afternoon digging the car out of the burning hot sand. I'm very sorry, Tai. The next morning we entered Uzbekistan. We were very glad to be there. One of the first things we noticed was the currency, the Uzbek som, had experienced a lot of inflation. But they didn't use any large denominations, so the largest bill we saw was 1,000 som, which was about a third of $1. Just to fill the tank, you had to give such a pile of bills. A lot of people just casually had one of these money counting machines, which felt sort of like being in Scarface, but it was not very practical. By the way, here they now introduce bigger bills. I can't find any of my pictures from Uzbekistan apart from this one, so I'll have to rely only on Tai's pictures. This picture is, by the way, from a guy who came up to me in a restaurant and asked for a picture, and we ended up talking a lot since he wanted to practice his English. We drove to Samarkand, which should be one of Central Asia's most amazing cities, an important link of the historical Silk Road. Well, we got stuck in a completely standstill traffic jam for about 3 hours. Nobody there really knew what was going on or why the city was closed. But some people mentioned rumors of the Uzbek president coming. We later learned there was a summit going on in Uzbekistan with all the presidents of the surrounding countries, such as Russia's Putin and China's Xi Jinping. Some of them would first take an official tour to Bukhara and Samarkand, which disrupted traffic. After some more waiting, we got impatient outside the city and drove to Tashkent instead, so we'll have to go back another time. The next day we walked around. I must say, Tashkent is also the city of the future in one way. They just planted basil in the streets. Overall, the Uzbek food we tried was quite good with a few herbs, and some very cozy settings for eating. Because of the summit, there was a lot of flags from all the attending countries. After some very enjoyable days, we drove to Tajikistan. On the Tajik side of the border, we got into a bit of trouble for the stupid washing powder again, but nothing serious. We drove through the mountains. At more than 3 kilometers up, we began to notice the car really had a hard time moving. The road through the mountains was a bit scary, but with an incredible view. We passed the Ansop tunnel, nicknamed accordingly. Occasionally you would be reminded of the safety by abandoned trucks which had fallen off the road. We drove pretty slow ourselves, but most other cars just rushed through at high speeds. They probably had places to be. We found this spot where we tried getting a nice profile picture for Thai. Finally we made it to the capital of Dushanbe. There was a road which should be even higher and sketchier, but also even more beautiful. The Pamir Highway in the east of Tajikistan, that would also take us by the Chinese border. But we would need to apply for a permit to drive there. So we went to the guy issuing the permits and made an application. He took our papers and said we should come back tomorrow. We each walked around the city. In the center I was approached by 2 policemen. They asked me for my phone and I had a feeling they might be trying to scam me. But I was also curious how they would do it. So I gave it to them to find out. They took a picture of me with this building in the background. And one more. And one with this tower. And of course a vertical one. And one with this flag, by the way the second tallest in the world. And naturally a vertical one with the flag. And one with the statue. And one more. And this nice one with a bit of his farm in the corner. At this point I was getting a bit annoyed, and the scam was obvious. The policeman would photograph me and later ask me for a lot of money for their services. I asked him to stop, and he took one more. Stop. He insisted on one more, and he gave me back my phone and asked for about $5. Which I thought was a fair price for 12 terrible pictures. Life was pretty chill in Tajikistan. Every day we would go in the morning and apply for our permit, and every day they would have a new problem and ask us to come back tomorrow. On our 5th day we gave up and just drove back the way we came from. This must have been how Morten felt. The Pamir Highway is probably stupid anyway. On the way back we saw the snow cave and these 2 rivers with different colors merging, which looked really cool. As we came down from the mountains, we dreamed about how nice air condition would be in the car. After a night in Hojand, we drove to Kyrgyzstan. Ride-sharing seemed common around these parts. A couple of times local people stopped us and just got in, so we went along with these small side quests as a taxi service and drove people to their destinations. No worries, we did of course not take payment. We continued towards the city of Osh. As all these countries were former parts of the Soviet Union, they have some messy borders today. There were 2 roads. One would take us back into Tajikistan, where we had just used our visa. The other would take us through Sok, a small chunk of Uzbekistan, where we had an extra entry in our visa, but had read online that entering the exclave was problematic for foreigners. Overall, getting any information on the openness of these borders was very hard. We opted for trying the straight route and to use our Uzbek visa. At first it seemed easy and we were once again in Uzbekistan. But a few hundred meters, a stricter control post appeared and we had to turn back into Kyrgyzstan. We put up our tents since it was late. The next morning, Tai, who's not happy about spiders by the way, found out he had a small 8-legged roommate under his tent. He didn't like him. We drove back and attempted to route through Tajikistan instead, hoping not to get arrested for visaless entry. According to the local people we spoke with, it should be fine and we saw no border guards or police, but in Tajikistan, driving the 10 minutes was one of the most scary parts of the trip, until we were safely back in Kyrgyzstan. After some driving we reached Osh, the so-called Great Silk Road Bazaar, an amazing city. Things were just a bit easier in Kyrgyzstan. Most Kyrgyz policemen we met didn't even ask for any money. Just leaving the car behind was of course not possible in most countries. So we had decided we would try to sell our car as scrap metal in Bishkek. At this point we were a couple of hours away from the Chinese border, and were pretty satisfied with our adventure, and decided just to drive straight to Bishkek. So yeah, this would maybe be a better title. We met Sanne and Jeroen, a Dutch couple who were also going to Bishkek, so we brought them along with us. The route took us through the beautiful Kyrgyz mountains. We stopped and filled our bottles with some fresh mountain water. Without comparison, the Kyrgyz people are leading the rest of the world when it comes to hat fashion. When traveling through Kyrgyzstan, you still see some people living a nomadic lifestyle in these awesome yurts. Suddenly the car started making a lot of noise, so we have to stop. I went under the car to check it out. Turns out this part was broken and hitting the wheel. So I began removing it, which took a bit of time. Anyway, while I was under the car, a lot of cows walked down the road. I didn't notice them until I got out and was shocked that a cow was looking at me. I later learned it's called a mudguard. Once we got to Bishkek, the project of selling the car began. First, we got it professionally cleaned. We had only temporarily imported the car and had therefore not paid any import tax or registration fees. So we would just try to sell it as scrap metal. Most people we met in Kyrgyzstan didn't speak English, and we could not speak Kyrgyz or Russian. So we prepared a few key sentences on Google Translate.
Мы не платили налог на импорт.
Next, we drove to a place where there seemed to be a few used cars. I began yelling my best, yet terrible attempt at the Russian sentences, and somehow attracted an audience pretty fast. Though I was trying to sell a car in a language I didn't speak, people were engaged and listening. I tried to say it was $200 and some guy asked if I meant $1,200. Another gave an offer of $500. We were afraid that we had not communicated clearly that it had not been imported, so we insisted on just $200, as we did not want to cheat anybody and have them be stuck with an expensive import process. Well, turns out they did understand and were well aware of how importing worked, so a lot were excited to buy it for just $200. We sold it to this guy. We actually asked him for a lift in our former car since we suddenly became pedestrians. Our last ride in the backseat of the amazing car. To be honest, we didn't really care that we could have gotten more money for it, as we had had months of incredible adventures in the car, and this way we were sure we didn't cause any problems for any of the locals. On our way back, we celebrated selling the car and now having $200, though we of course had to give 1/3 to Morten. We continued our tradition of going to the cinema, this time watching Tarzan in Russian. I have to give a lot of points to the Kyrgyz nightlife. We spent about a week in Bishkek, which is an amazing city with the mountains in the background. After we had kept moving for months, staying idle was nice. We had time to see a few monuments, just chill in Kyrgyzstan and again look for high viewing points. In the middle of Bishkek there was this old abandoned nightclub which was too cool not to explore. At night time we looked around the basement. There was no light at all down there, so when Ty's phone suddenly died it was completely pitch black, and rather scary having to feel the walls to get up. When we got up, 2 policemen caught us and demanded all our cash, about $20. They did drive us home afterwards though. After our time together there was another physics thing in Switzerland, so I was lucky to get a ticket back to Europe. Ty invited his sisters for about a week more in Kyrgyzstan before they flew home together. About a month later, when I was in Shanghai in China, the events were fun, but I must admit the adventures of the road trip were way more exciting. So let me just share some stupid and corny quote, like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Thank you very much for watching. I do plan on making more content like this, so if you want to support the channel, you can grab a shirt at spaghettiroad.com. Sweatshirt with all these guys are now available. I also need to give a big and sincere thanks to all the people who kindly support the channel on Patreon. I have gotten a lot of questions, such as how long did it take and how much did it cost, and I would love to answer all these questions and other in a future video, but this one is quite long right now. If you have anything else you would like to know, leave a comment or hit me up at my Instagram at spaghettiroadofficial. I am a bit of a slow replier though. Thank you very much, all the best.